Welcome back, WNST down here, and for those of us who have our Ravens PSLs and have our tickets and are making our plans for the 23rd of the month and the awkward Saturday afternoon holiday weekend game against the Indianapolis Colts or New Year's Eve against Cincinnati, I'm going to the game. I know there were at least 15,000 empty seats there this week, maybe 30,000 empty seats there the week before. It is not this guy's problem, but he did have a lot of empty seats out on 33rd Street at Oriole Park in the early days. That was not a problem. Marty Conway, longtime business friend and associate and professor of all things sports business at Georgetown University, and once ran the Baltimore Orioles here. And, empty seats used to mean the seats weren't bought, Marty, and I would say the really, really weird part about this, where I'm trying to write about it, think about it, talk about it in some sort of cogent fashion, because it does date back to the knee and bad offense and bad vibes and all this stuff, but this is a very, very alarming thing for me to see in Baltimore, which is seats that were sold at a premium number. I mean, $100, $200, $300, $400 tickets going empty on game days. I don't know that I ever thought I'd see this, Marty Conway.
Well, first of all, it's good to be with you, but these are, let's make sure we hashtag these first world problems, right? So
sure.
If you're in a situation where you've sold all of your tickets, but you're trying to do something to help people resell them, those are, like to call first world problems to have. There's a number of sport leagues and organizations that would love to sell all their tickets once, let alone try to help people sell them a second time. But yeah, we've reached the apex in a new dynamic now where, with the secondary market and other functions, you have to look at why people bought these tickets in the first place. And I do believe, and I have believed this for some time, that people bought NFL tickets largely as a little bit of an arbitrage, which is, I will invest here in the spring knowing that at least 4 or 5 of the games, maybe more than that, I should be able to sell them at some premium level, and I will take part in 2 or 3 or 4 games, whichever suits my schedule. But I will at least break even, if not make money, on the remaining tickets, whether it's the Steelers matchup or something New England or something else that comes along. Well, that's clearly not happening anymore, and I think it calls into question why many of these people, why they bought these tickets in the first place, and whether they bought a PSL to go with it or et cetera. And this is the dynamic I think that the NFL, in particular the Ravens here in this market, are now faced with, and it's a challenge.
I will say this, and I'm probably as good of an arbitrator on all of this, because I'm unique, man. I had my own section. There were 800 original PSLs sold in Section 513 and into Sections 512 and 14, where my listeners at that point in my life, 1996, 97, 98, wanted to go to the games and sit in an inexpensive section with real fans. During the preseason games, Marty, back in the 90s, our section was full with the people who actually bought the tickets, right? And it was fathers and sons, it was neighbors, it was beer buddies, it was me and my son, the guys next to us. My former business partner sat in the row behind me. We're estranged. I have another business partner sits 5 rows behind me. He doesn't come all that much anymore. People have died. Fathers have died. I mean, all of this stuff has happened, but for the longest time, and I don't think it was just in my section, I think this went on during all the glory days of the first Super Bowl through, let's say, the second Super Bowl, that 12-year, 13-year run. It literally was like a church or a college classroom where your students come in, they all sit in the same seats every week, they all take their places in the pew, it's the same people every week, year after year. There was a lot of that went on that we took for granted here, because it isn't that way in most other NFL places, certainly not in most baseball places where most of the stadiums are empty most of the time, quite frankly. The football thing in Baltimore, maybe college football would be that way, where whoever's been sitting together at Alabama or Auburn games, probably, their grandkids have had those tickets for, 30 years, 40 years, whatever it was. But who fills those seats now? And that's really a millennial issue, and I think it's a financial issue, and it's certainly a passion issue that is lacking at this point, that even though these tickets are sold, these people are either literally trying to screw the team by keeping the seat empty, which I don't believe, or they just literally can't find anybody to take the ticket for $20 or $50 or $10 or as a favor or a holiday gift or something, and want to physically perform the act of driving into the city and going to the game, which I've been railing about that with the Orioles for 20 years, that people in Westminster don't really want to rush downtown on a Tuesday night to see the Brewers play.
Well, I think you're right, particularly on the latter part, that the valuation, when you look at, and if people understand, they know StubHub or Ticketmaster, these what we refer to as the secondary market. When you look at the secondary market, it's literally like the stock market, right? It's purely there to create an efficient market for people. So if people want to advertise their tickets for $80, but the market will only bear $20, same thing with a stock. If you wanted to sell the stock at 80, but all the buyers were at 20, well, the value of your stock or your ticket is $20. And so that's what's changed. And historically now what you see is more people going to the secondary market, having an account at StubHub or Ticketmaster or whatever, and that's where they do their ticket shopping. They don't really prefer to do it that much. If they're required to, and this is what the Ravens and the Orioles do, require you to buy the seat up front, they will do it, but with the additional thought that there is potentially some arbitrage there, that I will be able to either sell the tickets for more than I paid for them, or at least face value, or worse than that, I'll be able to use them in a business-oriented way, or like you said, a personal-oriented way that I can get some return for that. If those three boxes don't get checked, then the tickets do sit there unused. They sit in somebody's drawer, or they don't. And I see people on my social networks all the time asking if people are interested in their tickets, and I rarely see a transaction or even an interest level take place. So there's clearly more supply than there is demand, and I think this is the challenge for both the Orioles and the Ravens, is to how to market yourself in that environment. And the last thing I would say is if you look at what the millennial attitude is about going to a game, literally, Nestor, they are happy to stand in the stadium with their back to the action and occasionally turn around to see what happens. They want social atmospheres. They want things like that. If you look at the renovations that occurred at Camden Yards over the last 5 years, it's all about removing permanent seats or making them larger so that you reduce capacity, and you increase areas that are like the center field platform or the flag court or the monument park or places like that, where people will spend most of their time and they will take portions of the game almost an inning at a time. And I think that M&T Stadium is a perfect example of a stadium that was built during the 90s, during that time of this is the way people do it, and now 20 years later, they consume their action completely differently. So as opposed to putting in big ribbon boards and elevators and things like that, I think they need to start looking seriously at retrofitting the stadium for a more social environment to watch football in.
Well, and the TVs were part of that, right? I mean, they went out and spent a phone number on televisions because bigger was going to be better. Marty, I can't begin to tell you, as a fan and as a guy who pays a lot of money to go to the games like everybody else, then Joe Flacco gets hit on the head by Kiko Alonso, and they refuse to put the highlight up, the replay up on the scoreboard. So they build these televisions that they want us to watch, except when they don't want to show us the game. And everyone else, millions of people in America watching the game everywhere could watch what happened, except if you were in your seat, you had the worst view in the stadium. I will never sort of understand that part of it and the psychology of it, to say, let's make this bigger and better, and then let's restrict it when people want to see it and use it. And, I don't know much, but I think whatever they were doing with those scoreboards, maybe about selling video ads or getting the out-of-town scoreboard or the fantasy scores up there and having a logo next to it of a business, it certainly is an incredible thing that in the year that they spent all this money on these TVs, everybody who had already bought the tickets went away from a team that's going to be a playoff team.
Yeah, well, I think that's a part of it. It's a part, you hit on that. It's the legacy piece, which is those boards, while they certainly are there for consumer interest, they're primarily about making money. I mean, they're certainly going to attempt to improve the experience for the fan, but they literally are there to do a better job and have more inventory, more colorful inventory, all the things that go with that. That was one of the areas that I used to be responsible for. So I know that's but clearly the bigger is better theory is legacy thinking. And I can tell you what happened is that most of the teams around the NFL and even other sports teams, they looked at what Jerry Jones built in Arlington and they said, we've got to have that. Well, I can tell you, I've worked in the Arlington, Dallas market. That works perfectly there, but it doesn't necessarily work in Baltimore or Washington or Charlotte or Miami or places like that. So I thought that was perhaps legacy thinking and that maybe it was a big expenditure, so it would seem like the right thing, but perhaps they were just at that point kind of running short on ideas, and so that was the one that was at the top of the list. I do think people want something in their hand that's reliable that allows them to control what they see and when they want to see it. So you want to, instead of looking up at the scoreboard, Nestor, you want to look down at your phone and be able to see anything that you want to see 2 seconds after it happens. If they can start to combine that sort of thinking, then I think they may actually have something. Otherwise, this command and control of we run the scoreboard, like you said, I think it will be difficult for them in the long term.
He is a sports professor at Georgetown University. He is our friend and sports and marketing executive, Marty Conway. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Marty Conway, as well as at LinkedIn, where he blogs, but not too frequently. You know, Marty, I'm putting together one giant steamer of a blog here that starts to feel like a 5-part series because the more I talk to smart people like you inside the industry, and I will be perfectly blunt with you, I have not spoken to anyone in the Ravens organization on the business side, and I know all of them, at all about this problem and this dilemma, because there is some guy like you sitting at the end of the hallway in Owings Mills with a suit and tie on, having to go out to military sponsors and defend the knee. The owner's angry down the hall because the place is empty. The coach is wondering what's going on. The team's winning all of a sudden. The players are having to answer questions. But more than that, I'm trying to really get a grip on what their strategy is going to be, because they've never really had to work all that hard at that part of it, because those seats have always been sold and always been sold to the same people. As I've pointed out for 22 years, they've never had to market in that way, in the same way that when Angelos bought the Orioles and the wheels started coming off, nobody knew what to do or how to do it because Camden Yards sort of sold itself for a period of time. This Ravens honeymoon has been 2 decades now. I don't know who the next people that are going to buy those tickets if the season tickets go unrenewed and people let their PSLs just float down the river. And I think that's certainly something, this is a little bit of an apocalypse here for this to happen in the way that it's happened. And I don't know what the strategy would be for anybody that works with the Ravens about what are they going to do about it other than to try to win, which they've been pretty decent at that for a long period of time, which I think, and maybe I'm going to ask you, this is sort of the loaded question, what has made the Ravens work so well, right? I mean, I know Angelos has probably played a part in that, in the misery, but this has been a pretty special little thing that's going on here for 2 decades, because it didn't work this way like this in Nashville and Arizona and St. Louis and all those other places that were picking up and moving franchises, as we're seeing right now with the LA experiment, right?
Yeah, and I think I've said this to you before, but if not, I'll reiterate it here, and that is that the Ravens do an exceptional job in many areas. I think that their community relations, for example, is second to none. I think their relationship to the community, you see it all the time. I think that their media areas, they've been really wise in reacting and responding to what the Baltimore media market is, which is not Washington and it's not Dallas. So I think they've done an extraordinary job in certain areas. But at the end of the day, if you've never really worked in an environment where you've had to hustle for tickets, whether it's $1.7 million at Camden Yards or $1.2 million in Arlington, Texas, or other places like that, it's a different mentality. Everything from how you structure your sales staff to what the incentives are and different things. So adjusting to the changing marketplace is number one. There is not one sport franchise in the world that hasn't gone through this. I don't care if you're Manchester United or Barcelona. You've gone through this experience where you've had incredible highs. And, yeah, in Baltimore, there was at one point 3.5 million people coming into Camden Yards. And the question was, what will you be doing when it's only 2 million?
Well, the Yankees had a new stadium that dried up in a couple of years. Yeah. They were selling $5 tickets on StubHub, right?
But so back to the Ravens, it's been a lot about scarcity, right? It's been 8 or 10 games, and if you don't get in, the sense is, well, if I don't buy my ticket, then I'm going to miss out. And like I said, that whole process. And I think that in the secondary market, it's proof now that as a football team, and I'm not just saying about the Ravens, but any NFL team, and if you look at what Jerry Jones has done, I think he's leading leadership on this, and that is you have to respond and react like any other business, which means I'm in business 365 days a year. And I don't think that you get that from most NFL franchises. You don't really get to interact in Washington. You don't get to interact in Baltimore or places like that. And so now if you look at what Jerry has done with the Star in Frisco and all these combination things, that's, I think, the kind of mentality that you need to be successful in today's consumer marketplace, which is we have to think that we are in business for sale, something for sale, 365 days a year. We can't sort of come and go as the season comes and go or when tickets go on sale or PSLs, et cetera, because things change. I'll tell you what, in the difference between when you put your tickets on sale a year ago to when you put them on sale for next year, a lot of things have changed in the marketplace, whether it's consumer habits, digital media, and on, let alone security and a bunch of other issues that might pertain just to Baltimore. So that sort of nimble and flexibleness is something that your organization has to have, because when you don't have it, I think you see some of these things start to appear and questions start to arise.
Marty Conway joining us here. It is all brought to you by our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender. My friend Carl Delmont and his group over at Freedmont.com doing it better than anyone. If you're buying, selling, maybe refinancing, or just need some information about where you sit in the marketplace, Freedmont is there to help you. Also brought to you by our friends at DNL Window Tinting. That's 26 years now of tinting everything. Cars, boats, businesses. They put the shades on the sun and they take away the squint. They are in Parkville and in White Marsh, and you'll get some of these sunny winter days out there. Get your tinting done at DNL Window Tinting. Marty, I don't want to be crass about this, and I certainly am not looking to offend anyone that is military-oriented. I come from a family where I have uncles, cousins have all served in the military, aunts, uncles, the whole bit. Grandfather, was in the U.S. Navy. So, I'm in no way disparaging the military, but what has gone on with the Ravens here since this knee has been, and I'm going to use the word pandering, and if that offends people, so be it. But I sit in the upper deck, and there's red, white, and blue when you walk in, and there's more red, white, and blue, and then there's Lee Greenwood, which they've always done, and then there's the national anthem, which the kids made me cry the other day, literally. I mean, I thought it was the best anthem ever. And then there is well, let's meet this woman who's in the Army, and let's meet this woman, and she's a hero. And there's 3 or 4 different times now where they're running the flag through the stadium. We all have to stand up. We all have to take our hats off. We all have to applaud. I mean, I'm not against it, but I'm also, it makes me itchy. And I know how much money they're making from their military resources, and I do know from the inside, the one thing I have from inside intel is that the military spends on their club seats is more substantial than in other markets. But I'm telling you, as a guy sitting in the stadium right now, there comes a point where you're trying too hard. And for me, they're trying to. They've crossed the bridge where I'm not saying, oh, God, I love America, and let's applaud. And this beautiful young lady served 3 tours in Iraq, and that's great. And it's the second quarter, and then in the third quarter, and then it's the fourth quarter, and we're doing it again and again. It's like baseball with the God Bless America thing in the 7th inning. There is a little bit that pushes to the line of, come on, man, you're trying a little too hard here. You really are.
Well, it's been an observation that's not uncommon. It's something that I've seen. If you've been to Washington Nationals games, you've been to Orioles games, you've been to many other games, stadiums in the marketplace. A lot of this, certainly, it's like you said, it's a delicate balance, and certainly, I think anybody that's ever served in any capacity, even first responders locally, nurses, teachers, deserve more recognition, way more recognition than they get. But having said that, I think what you see is sort of a follow the leader approach here on this. And that, look, if you're in a business capacity, you look about to what your competitors are doing, whether they're in your own market or whether they're regionally or nationally or even internationally. And you tend to think, well, it appears that that's working for them, so what can we do here? And then the other part is, especially if there's some corporate relationship to it that you can tie to it, it's difficult, frankly, for them to turn down, because who isn't against that at the most senior levels? But I do think we're probably at the peak or beyond. As you said, I think maybe there's a bit of an absorption of maybe too much. But again, it's one of these things where as long as the rest of the industry seems to be A, doing it, and B, perhaps even making some nice corporate sponsorship money off of it, then I think it's likely to stay, whether anybody in the stands thinks it's too much or whatever. But it's certainly, NASCAR is a big part of this. The NFL has done it. Major League Baseball is certainly doing it. The Orioles have been doing more of it in the last few years. So clearly a trend, and I don't see it stopping at any.
It's just point. Weird to me. I mean, in a 2.5, 3 hour game, how many times we have to acknowledge America? I mean, not to say that I'm against America, but it certainly is a lot more than it used to be. It certainly feels like more than before that knee thing happened. And I'm sure baseball's going to try to keep up. They'll stop the game in the third inning and sing "America the Beautiful" or something. I literally, I mean, they would, right? I mean, they would wrap the hot dogs in red, white, and blue, running around in the hot dog dances or the crab races or whatever. He is Marty Conway. He's out on LinkedIn. He blogs, he writes, he opines. He is a sports professor at Georgetown. And, a couple things sort of off the beaten path here for you and me with Ravens is you sent me over a link from Billboard.com about the NFL selling 50,000 tickets to Super Bowl concerts. Boy, music and sports, I mean, it gets you and me with Springsteen and all this stuff as well, but there's always an intersection here, isn't there?
Yeah, in fact, what the NFL did was the NFL saw that many other private interests not controlled by the NFL were making a substantial amount of money off of the location of the Super Bowl. So this year it's going to be in Minneapolis, and in the past it's been in Houston, wherever. And there were people staking out days before, nights before, and hosting major events and bringing in major acts for music and selling tickets for a lot of money. And so people literally were going to these locations for all the other activities and then not going to the Super Bowl because they were leaving town Sunday morning, Saturday night, whatever they were doing. So the NFL has, never leaving a coin unturned. They turned to 3 private venture funds to back a new venture called NFL On Location. And yes, now what they've done is they've taken any of the available NFL allotted tickets, that don't go to the local franchises or don't go to media or not obligated. So the majority of the stadium, that is, has been transformed into one giant package where you have to buy a Super Bowl ticket, and then also, by the way, you have to buy an expensive hospitality package that goes with it. And now increasingly, you're also being sold a ticket to a Dave Matthews concert or a Blake Shelton concert or somebody else like that in the day or two before that. So what was a $5,000 Super Bowl ticket is now $10,000 because it comes with an expensive hospitality package. And oh, by the way, tickets to and hospitality with a concert a couple of days before. So it has taken the everyday person, the everyday fan who can't get a ticket through their local team if they're attending the Super Bowl. It has completely priced them out of the market. And so, again, the NFL, anytime they see an opportunity that they are not a part of or they're not getting a percentage of, they're going to stop the music, literally, and figure out a way to better control it. In this case, we're going to see the first time in Minneapolis this year where they're fully engaged in that. And again, it's going to accrue all to the benefit of the NFL and the main office and the NFL coffers, and the owners will be pleased with that because their share of national revenues will go up because these kinds of projects now are considered must-haves. And you'll see the NBA and the Major League Baseball and others, they'll observe this and they'll figure out some way to have their own piece of it and do it in their own way in the future.
Last thing for you, Marty. I know you've been watching this Supreme Court situation with betting and gambling and sports and football and DraftKings and all this other stuff and legalized and getting it out of Vegas. I guess in the next couple of months we're going to find out a verdict on all this, but I know you've been following this as closely as anyone.
Yeah, on Monday, the Supreme Court was hearing the case of basically it's considered Christie versus the U.S. government. It's essentially New Jersey suing the United States government over its current prohibition, on the legalized gambling, which right now there's about 4 states, Nevada, one of them, New Jersey has a partial exemption to allow for sports betting in the state. And what it really comes down to is this. New Jersey is challenging court rulings that to this point have not gone in their favor, but they've actually gotten an interesting here. Even to get the Supreme Court through certiorari to even hear the case, you would have had 4 justices who would have said, yes, let's hear it. In the past, they would not even have gotten that. So the reason why this has got so much interest of late is the notion that 4 justices have even said, yeah, we want to hear that in our courtroom, let alone, no, we're not going to mess with it. And so the idea here is that even though the 4 or 5 major professional sport leagues and the NCAA have lined up against New Jersey, in other words, keeping the current status quo of having basically Nevada be about the only major state with legalized gambling, they have actually started to show cracks in that, where Adam Silver and others have said, maybe there is an opportunity down the road for sports betting in our business. We have an NHL franchise in Las Vegas. We have an NFL franchise headed to Las Vegas. Even Rob Manfred has indicated that Las Vegas would be a consideration, in his words, for a Major League Baseball expansion franchise. So, you're starting to see this change, and the big issue, which is this court hearing today, on Monday with the Supreme Court, sometime in next spring, late spring, maybe May or June, we may actually learn the results of this. And if it goes the way that some people are indicating, we may see 30 or 35 states begin to unleash plans to have their own sports gambling situation. And who knows what Maryland would decide to do. But certainly if they saw that their neighbors to the north at New Jersey and others were having a program, you would bet in Annapolis they would fire it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, you would have thought that when all the racetracks had slots and we didn't hear, right? It only took about 15 extra years, right? Everybody running to Charlestown, running to Delaware Park, the whole deal, right?
Right. So if it's going to happen, it certainly should happen quickly, because New Jersey is saying essentially that if this law changes, they would be ready to go inside of about 4 weeks. So I don't know, but it's got a lot of the sports business world looking. It's got a lot of the major leagues, the NFL, NBA types, looking to see what's going to happen. And it certainly has state governments interested, because certainly there will be some sort of taxation as a piece of it. So there would be some revenue to the state, to the city, to the county.
Or as they like to call it, free money, right? Literally.
Yeah, exactly. So those, that's one of the major things. And now, it'll go away for a while, and we won't hear the verdict until the Supreme Court renders it sometime in the spring of 2018.
Jersey. Forget about it, right?
Exactly.
Marty, always a pleasure, man. You going to be writing, blogging, doing anything here in the coming weeks?
I'm departing for Doha again for another 10 days, so not until I get back from that, but certainly a couple more times before the end of the calendar year.
It is a big world, Marty Conway. You keep learning and traveling. We'll keep checking in with you. We'll see you next month.
Okay, buddy.
You got it, Marty Conway. Happy holidays to him, former executive with the Baltimore Orioles and the Texas Rangers, now a professor at Georgetown University for all things sports and business. You can follow his journey out on Twitter and LinkedIn at Marty Conway. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. We're also the voice and your home for Coppin State Sports University, the Eagles, the Ladies Eagles. We're going to have ladies coach Dwayne Burrows on weekly, as well as Juan Dixon, who's been joining us each and every week to talk some college basketball as we get into the hardwoods. Also got to talk about Compass Point Golf Course down in Pasadena. It is your best place to play this fall and winter. Events, craft beer, and a great course close to home down in Pasadena. Go to compasspointgolf.com to learn more. And also, my man Robert Kennedy will be here week after week talking local college basketball, not just about Coppin State, but Loyola, UMBC, Morgan, Towson, Maryland, all that good stuff. Lots of college basketball conversation around here as well. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Last but never least, any breaking news happens first on our WNST tech service. That is all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday driving you home. It is the SSV on WNST, heard from 3 until 5. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.